Hello, Women in Tech and Women in Tech supporters, and welcome to the Beta in Real Talks. I'm Carly, aka.
Hi, and I'm Adriana, aka Leanie, and we are your hosts and the creators of Beta, a fictional series about how two very different women, Leanie and Delta, learn how to empower each other and lead in the tech industry.
And to support larger dialogues on women's empowerment in tech, and highlight the importance of representation in both entertainment and tech, two industries designing our future, we started a show called Beta in Real Talks with the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship in Chicago. A talk show where women talk to women about their journey in the industry and how to empower more women to lead in tech.
This week, we're going to Real Talk with Natalee Scott and Marie Caligiuri about how technology is impacting our current healthcare system, something I know we all care about, especially right now in the wake of COVID. But before we bring our guests on, we want to introduce you to the two fictional characters, Delta and Leanie, that were inspired by powerhouse women like our guests. So please enjoy our trailer, and we will be right back.
Oh my God, I hate my job. Just tell them that.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
Are you kidding me?
That's me, Leanie. This is Delta. She was my boss.
Exhale. You're good. You're good.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think you should be an entrepreneur.
Leanie, do you know what that word means?
I know this is something you've always wanted. Now's the time. And the tech industry is all the rage right now.
80% of businesses fail within the first 18 months.
This is gonna be so exciting.
You are brilliant.
I am?
Yes.
What did I say?
I don't want you getting involved in my personal life. You know nothing about me.
I'm your friend.
We are not friends.
A flower never competes with a flower beside it. It just blooms.
What about goggles that recognize images?
Like Google goggles?
Exactly. Oh, I see why that's a problem.
I never realized that we were so much on the same page.
We're totally in the same boat.
So we're going worldwide, baby.
Delta, I was gonna show you that we could.
Hello, ladies.
Hi.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Great.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here today.
Yes, and have much to talk about, but before we dive right in, we want to go ahead and let everybody know that's watching that if you have any questions, please do go ahead and put them into the chat, and there will be time at the end to address questions, but we're going to go ahead and have a dialogue first.
Awesome. Well, Natalee and Marie, we'll let you do the justice of introducing yourselves. Could you each tell us a little bit about your name and what company you're with and your role, and a little bit about what you do?
Marie, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So my name is Marie Caligiuri. I am the Vice President of Enterprise Strategy at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which is a company that owns 5 cancer hospitals and many cancer clinics. So my day-to-day can really range, but I report directly to the CEO and help him with a number of important initiatives. So whether that's a cultural initiative that's internal, or disaster planning with COVID-19, or talking about major strategic partnerships and how we can partner with other health systems. I'm never bored in my job, and I really, really enjoy it.
Great.
Awesome. And my name is Natalee Scott. I am the Chief Operations Officer and VP of Marketing for Medivisum Telehealth Solutions. We are a telehealth software company that is invested in remote patient care delivery. So especially in the wake of COVID-19, you may be hearing a lot more about telehealth and remote visits. So we are all in that space. I love what I do as well. And this is actually a bit of a departure for me in terms of the work in healthcare, but it completely aligns with my mission and the mission of the organization to just increase access to healthcare, especially in disadvantaged communities, and we see telehealth and remote patient care as a way to do that. So we're fulfilling a personal mission of mine, and given the environment that we're in right now, we're seeing much stronger use cases for applications like this. So it's good to be here.
Well, I have to say, I think I would speak for everyone. Thank you both for, you can never foresee catastrophe or trauma beyond what you already see, I'm sure, both in your fields. But thank you for your commitment and your passions, because especially right now, people like you are what are going to help us get through. So,
Absolutely.
Before there's, I just hear like telehealth and I'm like, oh God, we have so much to talk about. But before we jump into the nitty gritty of what you do and kind of what's happening, and we do want to look at our current landscape, we would love to just start. One of the premises, the reason for this show is showing the impact that stories in entertainment have in the media and entertainment have in our life, and kind of how they impact us from a young age, right? They kind of help to shape who we are. So we would love to hear what stories impacted you growing up, and it can be anything, books or people, but especially in the entertainment world.
So I would start. Yeah. So, I was thinking about that, and I grew up in Trinidad. I'm an American citizen now, but spent my formative years and my teenage years in Trinidad. And, we had a very different media landscape than you have here in North America. We had one channel for a very long time. So it wasn't so much media, but it really was books, and books, quite frankly, that my mother, as a professional woman, she was in sales, that she was reading. And even as a very small child, she never treated us like children. So we never had baby talk and any of those things. She was very open and direct and communicative with us. So, some of the books that she was reading as a professional woman, I find myself reading those books today. Like, I literally picked up Think and Grow Rich a week and a half ago and started reading it again. But those are the books that I remember. And I remember seeing my mom get dressed for work every day and come back home and tell us the stories of what she experienced out there as a woman, in sales, working with guys, and the books that she would be reading and the meetings that she would have. And that for me has shaped how I see myself and what I'm doing today, as a professional woman myself. So, it sounds really, it's your mom, but she was really the driving force for me. And those stories and those books were the things that, inspired me growing up.
How old were you when somebody handed you Think and Grow Rich?
So to be fair, I was about 11 when she was sharing those books. But I will be honest, it made no sense. I could care less. And then I got older and I picked them up again. And then I find myself picking up those books over and over again. And here I am a couple years later. Rereading that material, but I think it just kind of speaks also to some of these things are timeless, right? Yes. So it's still relevant today.
Definitely. Great.
What an amazing mentor to have at that age too.
Really.
Yes.
Really.
I think I was pretty sure I was still watching Disney until
I was going to say I had Disney princesses.
Well, we had fewer options. I will say that.
Might not be a bad thing. Marie.
Yes, Natalie's story actually reminded me of a gift I got on my 12th birthday from my parents, The Millionaire Woman Next Door. Which just kind of goes to shows a gift from my parents, and they really set the foundation for my career and my belief in myself. And so it's a sweet story. It reminded me of my own. But in terms of kind of media influences and people that I was drawn to, I always found myself really drawn to characters in movies, whether it was, Jennifer Gardner in 13 Going on 30, or real life characters, Jane Goodall, who studied chimpanzees, but people who had a really unique knowledge and who really dove deep into something and worked to understand it and kind of owned something that no one else really owned. And seeing how those people in different ways brought their knowledge to the table really inspired me, and it's definitely shaped my career and me as a person.
Right. And definitely here, right, that there's stories about women too.
Right.
And I do resonate more with stories that reflect to a certain degree how we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to that point, Natalee, if you could tell us, we'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. So these books inspired you, maybe it took a couple of years to sink in, but how did you dive into, telehealth or medical, or what was your journey that led you here today?
Sure. It's very circular, right? Because I remember in college, I was a pre-med student, and pre-med and cultural anthropology with a focus on African American studies. And when I graduated, I thought I was going to get a PhD and continue my course of study in academia. Ended up working in telecom for a while and realizing that my personality, a lot of I guess control issues, some people might call it, very kind of driven and process oriented and very, I think, business minded. So I got into marketing right out of college, did some brand management, but it had nothing to do with healthcare. And but I kept moving in that marketing space, and then kind of demonstrated a lot of ability in terms of project management and operations, and those skills just kept just kind of honing those skills as I continued through my career. So I went from telecom and then kind of further into the technical side of telecom, helping to develop a couple of e-commerce applications, like leading those projects, for a couple $100,000 development projects, and just kind of moving from there. But what ended up happening, so for a while I was technology adjacent, I like to say, but it really kind of sunk in terms of the operational aspects in the past, I would say 8 years, where I was really involved with the tech team in the development, in the defining definition of the products and project scope, and then moving into software and managing software and managing the software business for a company that was in supply chain management software. So that tech operations marketing combination just kind of kept coming up, and now this latest iteration in the healthcare space. What's new for me in the healthcare space is really just the particulars of healthcare, but the actual the operational aspects of managing tech businesses. That's been something that's kind of been with me for the past, I would say, 10, 12 years. So, I think, the timing and everything that I've learned along the way has all kind of come together and culminated in what we have going on today with Medivisum.
Amazing.
Yeah. And when did you move into your current role into the tech space?
So I've been in technology, hardcore technology software for the past 5 years. Medivisum is a company that we started in the past 7 months. So I'm a co-founder of Medivisum as well. So I have two partners, and they have a lot of experience with EHR development and in healthcare IT and compliance related to healthcare. And I bring my marketing and operations expertise to kind of make sure that we're getting everything done that needs to get done. So this particular iteration is fairly new.
That's so
what an
exciting.
incredible timing for you guys right now, as far as really being in tune and alignment with the energies in the universe, or call it what you may, but what a time.
Well, it's really great because the application existed prior to this particular timing, and we just had to reconfigure for the needs of the healthcare environment as it relates to telehealth particularly. So we always had the ability to do remote patient monitoring. We always had the ability to do telehealth remote or virtual encounters, but those were not the premier features of the application. But when we saw what was happening with COVID and people were using Zoom and FaceTime for encounters with their physicians, knowing that those things were not HIPAA compliant compliant, knowing that there was, patient privacy issues. And even though CMS and the federal government relaxed those in the wake of COVID, we know that those things still matter. And we know that clinical documentation still matters. So we just kind of reconfigured some of the parts of the application and brought those to the forefront for this particular time that we're in.
Great. We want to dive in a little bit more to some of that too and talk. But for Marie, what has been your journey? What brought you into the tech industry and your particular role in the healthcare industry, really?
Absolutely. Well, I started my career as a venture capital private equity investor, and I started out as a generalist, and we were mostly actually doing technology. And I spoke earlier about my kind of quest for knowledge and being inspired by people who really were knowledgeable about different topics. And so while there, I kind of realized that I had an opportunity to be the person who kind of knew the most about healthcare and the intersection of healthcare and technology, or kind of work toward that. There weren't a lot of people covering that at my firm at the time. So I pursued that path and learned a lot about healthcare, learned a lot about technology, and really saw this was kind of right around when meaningful use was right. So really saw where the opportunities were for EHR and other digital health solutions in healthcare and how it could really make it a better system. So after investing, I went to go work for a healthcare company that really focused on senior care. And there was even more opportunity, and I saw how even something as simple as a phone call check-in could make a really big difference in preventing what otherwise would have been a horrific patient outcome. Sometimes if you just call to check in on someone's day or do a televisit with somebody, they may not have gone to the doctor's office that day, but you might uncover some symptoms or something else going on with the patient that otherwise, nobody would have ever known about them until they ended up in the emergency room. So I really saw the influence that technology could have on bettering the system, bettering the quality of care, and like Natalee spoke about, giving people more access to physicians or other health practitioners that they might not seek out or otherwise have access to. So after that company, I went to business school, and then coming out, I started at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, where same thing, bringing access to patients, making sure that they are connected with our oncologists who are world-class in what they do and specialize in individual cancers. So that's something a lot of people otherwise might not have access to, especially during a time like COVID, where they know something might be off, they might have discovered something wrong, but maybe they're waiting, and by the time waiting is pretty torturous, even if you have something as simple as a red bump on your nose and you're not sure what it is. We've all kind of been in those situations where we want to see a physician right away. And so you can only imagine, hopefully none of us have to experience, but what that is like in cancer care. So it's really given us as a company an opportunity during COVID to see patients that wouldn't have been seen otherwise, and then just more generally, even outside of COVID, again, extend to people who may not have sought care or may not have sought it until later when the outcomes are going to be much worse.
Well, and to your point, timing is everything. Sometimes it's critical, and the wait time just people can't wait sometimes. And God bless those people. I know how frustrated I get when I just need to see a doctor for something small, and it's like, you can come in 7 weeks from now, and it's like 7 weeks from now. Like, what if this gets really bad?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear from both of you on, as we look more at telehealth and managing healthcare through technology, and this idea of access, that where the barriers have been historically, why we haven't moved in this direction, and then what you're seeing, really what COVID has, in many ways kind of opened up. I would just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
You start.
Sure. So our experience has been, number one, I think doctors are just chronically opposed to technology. And maybe that might be, worse in some cases, or rather than others, but just the adoption rate among physicians not wanting to necessarily change how they do things or the different workflows inside of their practices. I think that has been a challenge. So an overall kind of apprehension or, familiarity with how things are done always and not wanting to change. And I think, quite honestly, probably the biggest driver has been the federal government and CMS and, payers, right? So what will they be reimbursed for? And for a long time, telehealth did not have many reimbursements associated with it. So, they were not incentivized to participate, right? The providers. So now with COVID, they've relaxed so many of the requirements. They've opened up the reimbursement codes for the different providers, and, the in-person visits in some cases are reimbursed at the same rate as the telehealth visit. So now, because of this emergency, it is an absolute necessity for people to continue to have access to care. So they've opened up and relaxed some of these regulations. And the question now is, how long, and that, they have a few bills before Congress to kind of, talk about what happens after COVID, because we have seen adoption rates increase. We've seen, I think the number that they're estimating now is about 5 billion telehealth encounters for 2020. Prior to that, it was, a few 100,000, about 8% adoption. Now at the peak, we saw about 29% adoption. So we're seeing it as a real resource and a valuable resource in this time. So those were some of the things that we were seeing as a challenge for the adoption of telehealth.
Yeah. And Natalie touched on a really important theme, that adoption, and how reimbursement is really driving that, especially for physicians. Obviously, if you're going to get paid for something that you weren't previously paid for, you're more incentivized to do it. On the other side, too, from a patient perspective, telehealth could, in some cases, create just kind of a further disparity in the system. It's not a secret, unfortunately, that healthcare outcomes are influenced by income disparity or income disparity. And fortunately, it influences healthcare outcomes. So creating a product or providing a product where one has to pay cash instead of having your insurance cover it fully, that might deepen that issue. So having the government reimburse now, it kind of provides telehealth or other telesolutions to patients who previously maybe couldn't pay for it, or that was another barrier where they said, oof, $200 out of pocket to see my patient for something I might be able to wait for, I might not, okay, I'm much more likely to do it now if my insurance covers it.
Yeah.
So that was one barrier. And then, same thing with the adoption and access if you live far away. If you're working full time and you're working an hourly wage and you can't take off work, those things all contribute to healthcare outcomes. So providing an alternative solution really, really helps patients and helps physicians kind of stay on track with patients, stay on track with their care plans.
Yeah, to add a little bit to what Marie is saying in terms of the patients, what patients have access to. And I think this is the one thing that makes me so excited about telehealth. It's just to kind of get, the powers that be, so to speak, on board, because even for providers, it's an opportunity for them to increase access to care, to increase the patient outcomes because they've increased access to care, and to make this more available to, underserved communities. People may have issues around, like Marie was saying, I can't leave my job because I am getting paid by the hour. So I can't, take an appointment at this time of day. So telehealth says to a person like that, you may be able to just jump on a phone call or a video call with your doctor where you are at work. So you don't miss that half an hour it's going to take to get there, or having to leave work early, or even, having a later appointment with the provider. So I think it makes all of those things available. And then on the practice side again, which is why it gets me so excited, is because the average practitioner is struggling financially, keeping these practices afloat. It may seem expensive to us, but there's so much that goes on to maintain these practices. And many of these doctors are working some unreasonable hours just to kind of keep the doors open. And I think telehealth provides a way, if they're being properly reimbursed, provides a way for them to do more with the time that they have and generate a little bit more revenue for their practice.
Definitely.
Are either of you finding that patients are missing or are hesitant to not have the personal face-to-face? I know there's a lot of people in my life who I've tried to encourage through programs like this that are like, I'd rather see something about the safety of just sitting in the room with their doctor. Is that especially Marie with cancer patients, I would think, the importance of relationship there and feeling safe. Have either of you experienced those or had those conversations?
Yes, absolutely. Both in my current role and in my last role, where we did primarily work with seniors, it was an issue. But as technology has really gotten a lot better, it's all about getting people to try it and gain comfort around it. Most people who are hesitant, they haven't done it or it's going to be their first time. But once they try it, they kind of see, wow, the benefit of being able to connect with my physician or my other healthcare practitioner via, a telehealth solution is so much better than not being able to connect with this world-class expert at all. And kind of taking my chances at just the closest healthcare facility available. Of course, there are some procedures or some appointments where one would rather make that one-on-one connection in person, or it's just a necessity depending on what you're getting done medically that you need to be there in person. So that's kind of a separate category. But yeah, what we're finding is that people, once they experience a great telehealth solution, they love it. They love the convenience. And just like we're having this conversation virtually, you can often connect if it's the right technology and the right individual.
Yeah, and I think it's not an either or. I think telehealth is a supplement to your existing care plan. So you still should have that personal face-to-face with your provider, but this is in the instances where you can't. And there are patients who need just a check-in, right? If you're doing remote patient monitoring or any kind of remote chronic care management, it's not just the conversation that you're able to have with your provider, but sometimes you have a care plan and you need support in maintaining your care plan, right? So there's a reminder that goes out, and that's technology, and all that is part of telemedicine. So that little alert that you get that says, oh, remember to take your vitals today because your blood pressure or your A1C or whatever the story is there, those are different ways that technology and telemedicine is helping to provide better service and better outcomes for patients. So the telehealth is one aspect, and it's a complement, not a replacement.
And I did not realize, because I haven't had a lot of interaction personally with telehealth yet. I'm very interested in the topic, right? I've seen it come up and I'm like, what? But I really knew nothing about the details of how it's running and where the biggest obstacles were right now. I did not realize that you weren't being reimbursed for telehealth, most telehealth work in the same way. So what you're saying is prior to COVID, it was almost a separate private pay solution.
So there were some reimbursements, right? So remote patient monitoring, for instance, there was some reimbursement around remote patient monitoring and chronic care management. And I think there are some others. But for the most part, and I think that came about as a part of the Affordable Care Act. And it was this idea of preventative care versus being reactive. So we're trying to lower the expense of emergency room readmissions and visits. So this preventative care aspect and the remote monitoring piece was about making sure that we define a care plan for a patient and keep them on track with this care plan, so we won't have to incur the expense of readmission into a hospital stay or emergency room. So those things they're known and they've been out there and they're available. So there was some reimbursement tied to things of that nature. But I think what we see more and more with COVID in particular is just the expansion of what will constitute a reimbursable encounter for telehealth.
One of my favorite things about telehealth solutions is the fear. I don't go to doctors because I'm just afraid to walk into a doctor's office, because oftentimes I get more sick leaving than I was coming in. I have a little bit of a weak immune system, but being able to sign in and talk to a doctor through an app or through a virtual space for something small that I'm like, should I be worried about this or is this okay? I think is really incredible.
It is, and even especially now with COVID, my sister is pregnant for the first time during COVID, and being able
Congratulations.
Yes, I know. Congratulations.
That's so cool.
Oh my God.
It's a girl. So,
Yay!
yes, very, very excited. But, her being able to just ask those questions to her OBGYN, it might not be one of her regular checkups, but of course, your first time being pregnant, you have so many questions, and her OBGYN is at New York Presbyterian. So, that's kind of not a good place to go if you're worried about getting COVID or you're in a high risk category. So
yeah,
yes, Audrey, to your point, some people, they are immunocompromised, or, they're just one of those people that seems like they always get the seasonal flu. But in these high risk categories, especially during a time like this or any other time, it's so important for them to just have another option, again, to bring up any health issues or questions before things get bad, or before people become hospitalized unnecessarily because they've let something drag on. That's actually something that adds a lot of cost to the healthcare system too. So from a patient experience perspective, which is first and foremost the most important thing, it's super important to have that option. And then also just, you hear so much about the cost in the healthcare system and why is it so expensive in the United States, et cetera. A lot of that is due to unnecessarily hospitalizations.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like I could ask you both a million questions and dive into medical.
Right.
But
I know.
I also want to make sure we get to talk about, both of you are such incredible leaders in your roles and in your companies. And just to touch back to Beta, and kind of our mission and driving force with our story is women in these roles. And oftentimes we have conversations about once you get to those roles, what you do to be successful, but it's the path there that I find is sometimes the big question mark, where youth or people coming up that are interested in studying medicine or moving into a space like this are like, I just don't know what to do, and I don't feel like I can do it, and I haven't seen women like me doing it. And so we think that's really important. So again, thank you for what you do. But to that point, I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts in working in your space, and if you feel like you've had more experience with a more alpha culture or a beta culture, and we can expand on that a little bit if you'd like us to.
Go ahead, Natalie, or I start.
So I've definitely had more experience in alpha culture. I think things are migrating, things are transitioning a little bit. And to be honest, I've resisted this categorization of myself as an alpha, but if I am to be very honest, I definitely have some alpha traits. But it's interesting because I think they're both necessary. I think there's room for all of it. It's really a question of when is it required? When is it most useful, right? I think that so for me, I see myself as, I am alpha minded in terms of the results I want to achieve and my drive for those results. But in terms of the process, how do we get there? How do we interact? What do we need to do to get there? That to me is where the beta comes in. And it's really a question of, how do I define success in this particular venture in my life, or whatever I'm focused on right now? And what's more important? Do I need to win every single battle to win the war? Or am I interested in winning, the war, so to speak, in terms of my goals, my definition for success, the outcomes that I want to achieve? And that's kind of where I see the two coming in. I have the drive, I have the passion, I have the, I'm going to get there at all costs, the determination. Which a lot of people can define as very alpha-like traits. But the experience and the interaction with other people, how we get there, is where I think there's an opportunity to do things in a more iterative process, in a more collaborative way. So, there's space for both. And I feel like that's the kind of organization that we're building, and I've seen a bit more of that transition over the past few years in my career, but in the early days of my career, it was definitely, alpha and, quite frankly, male dominated. So.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of the same. I've worked in environments that are out, a lot of people who would, I think, categorize themselves as a traditional alpha, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
Beta is not a bad thing either.
Right.
But yeah, in finance, for instance, worked with a lot of people, particularly men, who would give an alpha personality. And sometimes that's awesome for the situation, and sometimes it's not, because there are always situations where you need to be collaborative. Everyone's bringing a very different piece of knowledge to the table. So I think, what am I? I think I fluctuate depending on the situation, absolutely. But at the end of the day, I really try to own my piece and, lean into what I like and what I'm good at. As some people say, lean into your strengths. I think that's important, but I also think that you have a right to pursue whatever you want and learn whatever you want, even if today it's not your biggest strength. So leaning into that and kind of owning it at your table, whether that's with other people on the same level as you, or whether you're leading a situation as more of a kind of alpha role.
Yeah. And I think what Marie, if I can just add, when she talks about leaning into it, I think that's so important. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that too. I remember when I was resisting, certain designations, bossy, controlling, audacious. And I was like, no, I'm not. Because it was such a bad thing when I was growing up, And the minute I said, yes, you are, and it's okay. And you just have to know when it's needed and when it's not, when to pull back, when to lean in. It became such a liberation for me, because now I can just be and I can breathe, right? As opposed to trying to, not upset people or be something that I wasn't. So I think there's a certain freedom in that embracing of it and just learning and growing from it. That acceptance is really, really important, I think. And it helps with the leaning in. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And I really love also what you said about, do I have to win every battle to win the war, Natalee? Because I think it's an important leadership style also to not feel to feel that being sometimes in a more beta culture and feeling the freedom to be creative and try new things, knowing that they might not all work. I think that's the only way to really encourage our highest level of potential and creativity. And I think sometimes needing to feel so perfect all the time along the way can really be something that stifles that. So like, what does that journey look like? And like you said, maybe to win the war, we're going to learn different things through each battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being open about when you're learning, and, if you're seeking to learn something in particular from a certain person, being really open and honest about that, it will strengthen you in the workplace and the way others perceive you as this is a really hardworking person who is looking to grow. And, I can offer them something, and people will be more open to mentorship and a number of other things that'll really help you grow and learn in your career.
Well, and Marie, you started in VC. Was that something that you knew you wanted to go into, or is that something you were encouraged by peers around you? Because as you said, the percentage of women in VC is very small.
Yes, it is. When I started in venture capital, I went to Stanford for undergrad. So, I was surrounded by all of these brilliant people majoring in computer science and engineering, and the founders of Snapchat were in my class, and a number of other awesome businesses. So I didn't have any billion-dollar ideas of my own at the time, but I was really inspired by entrepreneurs, by people who were working together or had just such an amazing talent to develop something that would become a really cool product or company or serve some other need in the community. And so I really wanted to be a part of the action, but like I said, didn't have any of those ideas at the time. So was fortunate enough to get an investment role right out of college. And I remember interviewing with my firm where I would eventually work, and kind of telling my dad about it, who's an academic physician, and he was looking on the website and he was like, well, opportunity is inversely proportional to what's in place. So, I don't know, again, I think that kind of message from my parents to not be afraid, not back down, you're you.
Amazing.
It's great to be yourself. And so I kind of went in, and it was an amazing experience. I would say for all those kind of negative experiences that you hear about in the news, those definitely happen. It's really important that there's reform there and that we pay attention. But for every one of those, there were at least 100 wonderful mentors and colleagues and friends that I made along the way who were so supportive of my career as an individual and as a woman. So, and again, it's pretty cool to have a unique space at the table that really you can own, both not only because of your gender, but because of your interests.
Yeah.
There's so much from both of you when it comes to kind of this is kind of going back to that leaning in and finding that balance between these two energies within yourself. And I would be so interested to hear from your leadership as your leadership style develops, and when you became more okay with the more assertive part of yourself, and also when when I guess the thing is when to lean in and when to come back. That each of us finding this balance, what your journey has been, and kind of how you work with your teams to embrace when so that you're free to own that more assertive energy, but at the same time getting the feedback that you need to make sure that you're still being collaborative, that you're improving where there might be improvement needed. I think that balance is really hard, and all of us kind of do it differently, and I'd be really curious to hear how you kind of do it in your work roles and with your teams.
Sure.
So go ahead, Marie.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to start. I think one of the cool things about healthcare is there's so much to know, and there are so many corners of healthcare. I'm not a physician. I've never worked for an insurance company. I've been a patient, and I've kind of worked for physician organizations, and I've worked in an investing role. So I feel like I have a lot to offer when I do come to the table, but there's so much one does not know. And I think just framing every meeting you're a part of or every group you're a part of, why am I here? What can I contribute to what we're trying to solve for? Do I know about supply chain? Do I know about, clinical information? Do I know about how we should be deploying dollars and measuring things, which is kind of tends to be my corner. But, really speaking up and having, helping to teach others when there's something you're really knowledgeable about from experience or reading, or kind of, again, accumulating that knowledge through interest and mentorship. And then also sitting back and listening and asking a lot of questions to people who, they own their own area, and similarly to you, they want to feel empowered and helpful in situations when they're trying to solve a problem. So I love to work in teams. There's just so much out there to know and consider in the world. And I think learning how to give an opinion, but kind of framing, where are you coming from? That doesn't mean you need to caveat, I don't know anything about this, it's okay. But saying, asking questions and being really, really inquisitive is always a way to be present and helpful. It's just good decision-making requires respectful dissent and a lot of people around the table.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some of that.
All right, I promise.
But I think, everything that Marie said, and I also think that, feedback and not being afraid to ask for feedback and to give it quickly. My mentor, who's also my partner in this venture, he's said to me a few times, you want to give feedback, in the moment, and you want to make it quick and not personal, right? So you don't want to hurt people's feeling, keep it objective, keep it about what the situation is at hand. And it's a learning opportunity. So I try to give feedback in that way, but I'm also very much about receiving feedback. I want feedback from my partners. I want feedback from my managers, and I want feedback from my my team. And I think that that openness to say, hey, I obviously do not know everything. I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to hear what you think about. And there's always something to learn in every environment, whether it's about this particular situation or even about yourself. And the idea of empowering people that are coming up is so important. How do you empower people? You can teach some things, but then you have to give people an opportunity to do it themselves and to not do it the way you want. And for it to be okay. And I think sometimes I also try to, it may not be what I want or how I would do it, but does it do what it needs to do?
Yeah.
So even if I can change like 100 things about what you've just given me, sometimes if it's going to do what it needs to do, that's fine. Right? So that they start to feel much more confident about stepping out and doing things. So I think, that whole process of learning and growing and, trying to create an environment, the kind of environment that I would want to thrive in as well for those people, I think is part of what that looks like.
I'm hearing so much to embrace the assertiveness and the directive part of yourself and to really give it permission to do what it needs to, practicing a huge amount of humility and curiosity. So it's so funny that you're, something that we would typically not put with that trait is actually what allows it to be so powerful.
Well, I remember doing a leadership course about 10 years ago, and we had to affirm ourselves, but they wouldn't let you just affirm yourself in a weak way. You had to come up with 3 ways of describing who you are, and they had to believe that you meant what you said. And one of the things that kept coming up was vulnerability, and how much power there is in vulnerability. And I think prior to that, it wasn't one of those things that I was comfortable with. But I think just realizing that it takes nothing away from you to open up and to show yourself. Nothing. In fact, it takes a lot more courage to open up and show yourself. So it's kind of like leaning into that, like Marie was saying. And I think it creates a space for people to open up as well.
What would you say to people who would argue and say in business that showing vulnerability sometimes signals weakness? I think that's the biggest fear with being vulnerable, especially as a woman at a table of men trying to be assertive and kind of take your place.
I think honesty is so important in the workplace. And if you're not transparent about what you know or what you're currently capable of or who you are, it will come back to bite you. I think we've all been in situations where, either you're talking to the person cutting your hair or you're talking to someone really about a really, really important project at work. And you can kind of see it on their face that they don't understand what you're asking them to do. I want an inch, I want, what layers are, or, do you know how to increase engagement at work? And there's nothing to take away somebody's confidence in you, like, nodding, but being unsure. And then the result is disastrous. It's people will have so much more confidence in you if you say, I've never done that before. Can you walk me through it? Or, I could use your help on this in particular. I'm not comfortable with that. It's about getting a job done to the best of your ability, but also not feeling like I need to we've already said it, I need to pretend like I know everything.
Yeah.
It's giving others confidence that, they don't really care whether you know everything or not. They want a job well done at the end of the day. And so I think asking questions is empowering.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, I think, showing people that you don't have to know everything. You just have to know where to go to get the answers, right? So that's essentially what it is. You can't possibly know everything. And then it gets boring, right? So, if you think you know everything, then you're probably the worst person to be around because there's no room for growth.
Yeah.
So, I think, for me, work is life. And not to say that I live for work, but this is an extension of who I am. So who do I want to be in my life? And I really, at this stage in the game for me, it's about maximizing who I am in all areas. So I used to be worried about that idea that vulnerability was weakness, and some people perceive that. I'm so past that now, because this is really about me being my best self and bringing my best self to everything. So
both of you seem to have done such a great job of that for yourselves, and also finding organizations that allow you to be that best self, and to be that leader with other people that you're bringing in. Is there any advice that you would give? Because I think we've all been in environments where that may not be the case, where there is a certain degree, when we look at the alpha, it's a little bit more of, I hate the word toxic, right? But let's just say abusive. Because really that those environments, how as people that are kind of coming up in the industry, can we start to identify when we might be in a culture that's not allowing us to be in our best, to be our best selves, and what to maybe do about it?
Yeah, I think a question I really like to ask when I'm interviewing for a job, and they're kind of asking, any questions about the company or the role, I really like to ask, what would make somebody successful at this role? And there's always an answer, right? Because you're asking for an answer. And so sometimes people will kind of describe a perfect prototype of a person. It's very personal. It's, I want somebody aggressive who speaks really loudly. And those are things that at least I have tended to shy away from, because I don't see myself as that, at least in most situations. So I think that's if they really feel like you have to have been a linebacker and super gregarious all the time and, make everyone laugh, that can be a toxic culture, because it's a lot of sameness. And if you're not welcome at a table for what you bring, those are kind of cultures that you can spot from a mile away. Okay, that might be an issue, because of course, not every person that walks through the door is going to be, the linebacker or whatever it is that they're looking for. So, you don't ever want to be in a situation where you have to fit a perfect mold in order to be considered successful at the company. It should be about performance, doing it your style. In any successful organization, you'll find diversity, at the table, different ways of approaching problems. So I think organizations that are understanding and appreciative of that are the ones where you want to be.
Yeah.
Right.
And a friend of mine's who you interviewed recently, Jill Griffin.
Oh, yes.
She told me a few years ago, and this has stuck with me will stick with me forever. She says, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And I love that. I think, the idea of just, moving from one place to another, it's not always easy when you're in, finding a job, not always the easiest thing to do. And sometimes you can never know what's happening there until you get there. But you do start to know when it doesn't feel right. You wake up with Monday morning blues, you're dreading encounters with different people. So you have those indicators. And when you look at yourself and you know that you've been doing everything you can, you come to terms with this may this may just not be the organization for me. And you begin that process of finding out the things that really matter to you, because sometimes we don't really know what matters to us either. And it's in the course of being unhappy in your current role that you understand a little bit more about what are the important things for you in your career, in your job? How do you work best? What's not working? So sometimes that discomfort is just information. And once you have this information that you didn't have previously, now you can make a better decision going forward. But if you are in a toxic work environment, at least toxic for you, I think the sooner you can disengage and find that place where you are celebrated and not tolerated. Don't be afraid to make that move. And I think the one thing that I've carried with me, I think throughout my career, I knew that I would never be in the same job for start here and retire at the same job. I think my parents' generation was the last generation for that. So the idea of fluidity and having different professional experiences and having different paths and changing course, I think that's par for the course now. So I think young people coming up should expect to have a couple different career experiences, and everything that you've learned from one feeds the other. You learn marketing and operations here that you can parlay into a different industry, and that's absolutely beneficial and relevant because you bring a wider set of knowledge and information and experience to that particular space.
Can you just call my brothers and nephews right now and tell them all that? They don't want to hear it from me, but that's exactly it.
Right.
It is such a different generational thing, I think, the idea of constantly evolving through careers.
Oh, well, I mean, look at considering our current landscape right now. It's like it was already it was already there, but now, I mean, we're just in full-on disruption from all sides, and it's like the idea of stability in anything is we have to embrace that. That's just not the way it's going to be for a little while. No. So,
yeah, I think it's not going to be like that at all. I think if we, personally, socially, culturally, as a country, all of these different things, if we have to be just keeping up with technology and how quickly things change, there is no room for stagnation. I mean, you may survive, but you would be just surviving. So if you really want to thrive, you have to be open to learning continually. It does not stop. School is just the beginning. Life is a constant journey. You keep learning, you keep adding to this, because otherwise you're just going to become obsolete, I feel. Or
got to be flexible.
Yeah. Well, we have journeyed through so much. We're coming up.
I know. I still have so many questions.
I know. I'm like,
call me after.
Is there anything else that we want to make sure that we cover? Because now I'm just all in trying to make sure that we've gone through. Do we have any?
No, I think we hit our big talk questions along the way, which is fascinating. Marie or Natalie, do either, if I'm 18, I'm getting ready to graduate high school and I have an interest in healthcare or in telehealth solutions, what advice would you give to students coming up, especially in the climate right now, of how to pursue that and the best way to prepare themselves?
Mm-hmm. Get work experiences and really just start that process that Natalie was talking about. Each job, good or bad, whether it's serving ice cream or being a physician, you're learning what you like, what you don't like, where you find yourself empowered and valuable. So I think the sooner you can get into a workforce, even if it's working 5 hours a week while you're in school, doing an unpaid internship or paid, whatever it is, get those experiences as early as possible. And again, hone where you want to kind of start your quest for knowledge, and hone kind of just let your interest really guide you from one thing to the next.
Yeah, and I think just bring your passion and they bring all of that. So it may change in a year, but everything that you have, this is an opportunity. Every job that you have is an opportunity to just put your best foot forward, and it's going to teach you so much. So don't hold back. It may be the silliest job or whatever it is, but there's so much to learn there. So bring all of your passion, bring all of your drive. You're young, you're energetic, throw it all into that, and people will start to really value just even the drive and the passion, and they will invest in you, I think, when they see that drive. And that can take you far. That can take you places with a lot of people inside of different organizations, or even in partner organizations or client organizations. When they see your enthusiasm and your commitment and your drive, that's kind of how you start building a reputation for yourself, regardless of what space you're in.
Yeah, showing you're willing to work hard.
Just care about what you do.
Care about it.
Big. A lot of people don't.
Yes, no, they don't. We don't need any more of that.
No.
Great. I think if we had some plugs, I know, Natalee, we also have your video from
Medivisum.
From Medivisum. I almost came up with a whole different word. Like, is that even English? We'd love to play that. And then if either of you have any plugs or kind of things that you would like to say on the company, or just words.
Sure. So I think Medivisum it's a newer company for sure, but our commitment to making sure that we are providing and expanding what care delivery looks like, that's what we're about in Medivisum. So working with providers, working with insurers, working with associations, or home agencies, home health agencies, long-term care, we're in that really, really great spot where there's so much broad use cases for what we do, and we're committed to COVID or no COVID. We're committed to making sure that we're able to reach as many of those patients that we can. And like Marie was saying, it affords patients an opportunity to have access to, an expert that may be in New York or California. Meanwhile, they're in a rural clinic somewhere in the Midwest or wherever that is. So it really does expand the borders of what's possible. And we're committed to doing that with the Medivisum solution. So we look forward to partnering with all of those types of companies going forward.
Wonderful. And maybe before we move away, Kayla, can we play? Does that video have sound to it? Do you know, Natalee? Oh, emotional.
Very literal, we were.
It's great though. Thank you for that. And Marie, anything that you would like to say before we sign out?
No, thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure. Really fun.
Thank
I
you.
hope you both wake up every morning and know that you're changing the world. So thank you.
Likewise.
You ladies are awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was amazing.
Fun. I know.
Yes. It's so fascinating. There's so much. What a time of change and innovation happening.
There's a lot happening all over, right? Good.
Yeah.
Not good, but yeah, there's just a lot happening. But yeah, wow.
Well, we're happy to bring the good to the Beta Talk. So
Yes. And with that, we'll go ahead. Adri, you want to go ahead and start our close?
I'm Adriana Leonard, writer, actor, producer of Peanut Productions, LLC. You can find everything about me at adrianaleonard.com.
And I'm Carly Marcel. I'm a speaker, thriving humanity guide, and the founder of the Matchutine Network, which is empowering change agents to become thriving humanity leaders at work and in society. You can find out more about me at carlymarcel.com.
Thank you for joining us
Thank
for the
you.
Beta In Talks, and we will see you all next week.